Nate Diaz has been one of the most recognizable names in the UFC for quite some time, but things have changed for his career in an unexpected way. And in today's video, we're going to be going over what would be best for his career going forward. This is a video that no fan of the UFC is going to want to miss, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. First up, is the UFC still the best place for Nate Diaz? Nate Diaz, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the most recognizable names in the UFC, and rightfully so. He's earned his way to superstardom and has become a household name and a favorite by so many UFC fans worldwide. So his current stalemate with the UFC is something that nobody wants to see. Everyone, including Nate Diaz, wants to see Nate Diaz fight again, and they want to see it sooner rather than later. But if this stalemate continues, how long will we have to wait for a fight that includes Nate Diaz? Diaz has been offered multiple fights by the UFC, and reportedly, and evidently, he has declined all of them. However, it's public knowledge that Nate did agree to fight Dustin Poirier, as they were even scheduled to face each other at UFC 230 before a contract issue ultimately changed the course of the fight, and thus, it never happened. So now what? What is Nate supposed to do if the UFC refuses to give him a fight that he wants? Or if he refuses to bend his standards and fight somebody that the UFC offers him to fight? Well, unfortunately, it could be a very long time, and it could possibly be outside of a realistic time frame for Diaz, which could result in him retiring from fighting before he gets another gig from the UFC. As sad as that would be, it's not unrealistic if the current stalemate continues. So what if there is a really obvious answer that we've all been overlooking? What if the answer is a plan that is so stupid it just might work? Well, Yancy Medeiros of Bellator fame seems to think that the best thing for Diaz's career going forward may rely on a very risky plan, and that plan is for Nate to be released from the UFC. I know that sounds insane and counterintuitive, but he might have a point here. Medeiros had an interview at the end of April with the MMA Hour, in which he gave his take on the entire situation, and it did involve Diaz being released from the UFC. Obviously, no pro fighter wants to purposely cut ties with the UFC, but this may actually be what is right for him at this point in his career. And trust me, you'll agree after you hear what he had to say. You never know what you have until it's gone. Nate Diaz's song. While the UFC are clearly fine sitting pat on this issue and letting Nate Diaz sit on the sidelines, they may be sad to hear about him leaving, as he is a huge pull for the league. People want to watch Nate Diaz, and they most likely wouldn't care what league it's in. Medeiros said, everyone's like, what's the biggest thing that's going to happen? He should fight this guy, he should fight that guy. Medeiros continued on by saying, honestly, I think the best thing for Nate's career that could happen right now is if he got released from the UFC. That would just blow him up, you know what I mean? You know what, Yancy? I do know what you mean. If the UFC all of a sudden lost one of their biggest draws, they would certainly be feeling the pain. Diaz is a draw to true fighting fans, regardless of which league he happens to be fighting in. In fact, some people might be more excited to see one of their favorite fighters in a different league, with different opponents and different rules. Furthermore, Diaz recently took to Twitter and announced that he was willing to fight literally anybody, excluding Conor McGregor. So that leaves a huge number of opponents for the UFC to match Diaz with, and yet they haven't gotten it done. Moreover, Dana White is sticking to his story that they are trying to get Diaz signed to a new contract. But if that were the case, don't you think they would be trying to book him into some more fights so they can get a realistic number to negotiate towards when it comes time to write up the actual contract? It's definitely in the UFC's best interest to sign him and to give him more fights, and the fact that they are seemingly in no rush to do either should be a red flag for Diaz. The UFC may be begging on the street if they want to keep Nate. Medeiros is a UFC insider, but there's no guarantee that he has definite insider information, but he may know at least some rumors that we don't know. Medeiros is convinced that this issue has sprouted and mutated from the fact that Nate Diaz believes that he's never been paid fairly for what he brings to the table for the UFC. Diaz has publicly stated multiple times that he feels as though he's performing at a high enough level and is acting as a lightning rod for fans and viewers so much that he should be earning more money. So now we have an organization that's dead set on saving as much money as they can and managing their assets as best as possible, and a fighter that's being low-key shunned by his league due to the fact that he wants to be paid fairly. We have all seen this movie in every pro sports league, and it rarely ends well. Medeiros commented saying, it always has to do with money, he said. You see, Dustin wants to fight him, and Nate wants to fight Dustin and get his fight out. So I just think you can connect the dots why the UFC doesn't want to let him go. But I feel that the biggest thing right now that could ever happen for Nate is if he was released, because that man knows his bag, he knows his work, and there's a lot of people that want to invest in him and make him rich, more rich. So clearly, Diaz has work if he wants it, so if the UFC refuses to fork over the cash in order to keep him, they may end up missing out on the remainder of his career. It seems clear that Medeiros knows that Diaz could easily make Bellator more top-heavy in terms of talent if Diaz was to join that league after a departure from the UFC. Moreover, Moreover, if he wanted to raise the popularity of literally any other fighting league in the world, he could choose to become their flagship athlete and really cash in on the fact that his name alone is worth so much in this sport. While the UFC is obviously the most recognized and the highest competition league in combat sports, if they're not willing to pay Diaz or allow him to earn more money by being booked in a fight that he wants, then he should have no desire to stay in that league. But what are the odds that this actually happens? Can we realistically expect Diaz to leave the UFC? Is this the end of Diaz's time in the UFC? My heart wants to say no, but my brain is sort of leaning yes. While I don't want Diaz to leave the UFC, it's almost clearly the right move. Not only would Diaz be able to secure a huge amount of money with another league, it may spark some real change in the UFC in terms of how the league treats its athletes, and it might eventually lead to Diaz being given another contract in the UFC after he becomes the champion in literally every other fighting league in the world. If Diaz were to leave and find work in another league, it would also make the UFC look really bad, which would once again be a dramatic spark that would force the hand of the UFC into treating their athletes better. Because if Diaz does become the champion in another league, what's stopping other UFC athletes from following Diaz's footsteps and stepping into a lower competition league in order to secure the bag and have a chance to challenge Diaz for a championship? Diaz changing legs could spark a revolution that causes the fighting world to branch off into different leagues, and I know that the UFC doesn't want that. They currently have a monopoly on MMA pay-per-view, and if they end up having to split time and sacrifice athletes to other leagues because they decided to mistreat Nate Diaz, would be a huge blow to the league's revenue. And you know how they feel about their revenue. It does seem like all the boxes that Diaz may want to check off would actually come from leaving the UFC rather than staying in the UFC, and it seems like the UFC could have all of their boxes checked off if they kept Nate Diaz, and yet they seem to be in no rush to do so. So as of right now, we're in a strange impasse, and it may result in one of the world's favorite fighters being shipped off to a different league. Hopefully it won't come to that, but only time will tell. That's all we have for you guys today on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you all in the next one.